but specifically they served the priests. The priests served the tabernacle, and the Levites served the priests. And God made that distinction among those two categories of people. Not every priest was a Levite, but not every Levite was a priest. And so you're going to have this succession of the priesthood initiated here when it comes to Aaron's death. Here at the end of chapter 20, that's where I didn't quite get to in our study Sunday morning. So I want to make sure I come back to that. Let's talk a little bit about that. I'm going to actually run you out of the book of Numbers for a few minutes tonight because there's some geographical issues when you're trying to work through Numbers chapter 21 a little bit and some of the other contexts that come up. So we'll talk about some of that before we're done this evening. But before I go any further, if you would, let's bow our heads together and share in a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, again, thank you for this day you've given us, this opportunity to study your will and to appreciate your testimony tonight. Thank you for this rich history of your people and how you guided them and led them and challenged them, purified them, purposed them, and to ultimately bring your fulfillment of promise in Jesus the Christ. Thank you for Him and the salvation and hope that He provides. Encourage us in our study tonight. Help us to appreciate your testimony more and more every day. And we pray all these things through Thy Son's name. Amen. All right, so let's jump back in here. I've got it on the screen for you. About verse 22 of Numbers chapter 20. And let me grab, 2 seconds. I'm getting really, really bad about this. I keep leaving stuff elsewhere. So, people at home going, they slip off for a drink of water or something. I had to grab my notes. I keep leaving them on desks other than this table up here. So let's talk about this this situation with Aaron, right? Who died at the beginning of the chapter? Miriam died, right? And quick reminder, where are we on the chronological timetable? Yeah, 40th year, right? We're at the end of the wandering. It felt like we kind of just got the wandering started, and then all of a sudden Numbers chapter 20 goes straight to the end. And then later chapters will kind of revisit the history and back you up and look at it from a different perspective. I'm going to share some other context with you tonight to help you frame maybe a little bit more about the history of what's going on in this time period. But we learned that the children of Israel, even the whole congregation, it said, journeyed from Kadesh and came unto Mount Or. Now, here's the challenge that we have with some of these things. We kind of know where Kadesh Barnea is, right? We got a general idea of where that is. But when it comes to geographically, there's a lot of speculation about where a certain city, a certain place, regions we're pretty good at, right? We know where the Edomites basically were. We know where the Moabites basically were. We know the Amorites were kind of sandwiched in that city, right? You know the Canaanites are to the south. You can kind of figure out geographically regions are a lot easier to kind of come up with conclusions about than are specific cities and places. And so if you recall, and I'll just show you on the screen, let me see if I can get a different colored pen handy here. So down here at the bottom of this screen that you're looking at, that is Mount Sinai down here. Okay, so just get your general idea. Very bottom of that screen that I just circled in red, that's Mount Sinai, right? That's where what came? That's where the law came, right? So they travel along the sea for a period of time. Then if you follow those blue arrows on the screen, it helps you kind of get that imagery. So follow that blue arrow from Sinai and come northward to the tip of the sea there. And then they journey northwest up into Kadesh Barnea, and that's through the wilderness of Paran, right, on into the wilderness of Zin, and that's where they were when they sent out the who? when they sent out the spies, right? That's where they were when they sent out the spies. The spies went clear to the north and then circled back and came back. And as they came back down, that's when they gathered the fruit and the things that they were going to share with the people to give them an idea. But Kadesh Barnea is kind of where the encampment was. Then evil report, God's punishment. Now they're going to have to wander, right, for 40 years and travel here and there as it relates to those things. We learned in our study in chapter 20 that Moses had a conversation with whom? What nation? The Edomites, right? He has Numbers 20 recounts that he has a conversation with the Edomites. And what did the Edomites say? Yeah, you're not coming through here. You're not coming through here. And Moses and the people did what? In response to that. Okay, they tried to strike a bargain. But cutting to the chase, though, they left, right? They didn't force themselves. The general idea of that is, if you're, again, back in Kadesh Barnea, okay, big red spot that I just circled there, if you can imagine them heading over towards Edom, right, to try to depart or to try to start the northward trek, they're rejected, so they begin to work their way south from that point, okay, down towards the Red Sea. They try to work their way down towards that body of water, and they'll eventually, it's generally believed then, they come to the south along the coast of the Edomites, and then they circle back towards the north and actually end up in a couple of cities, or at least reference points as it relates to that. But here's what I want you to notice, though. So they journeyed from Kadesh and came unto Mount Or, and the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron in Mount Or by the coast of the land of Edom, saying, Aaron shall be gathered unto his people, for he shall not enter into the land which I have given unto the children of Israel. And here's that question we talked about last Sunday morning. Because ye rebelled against my word at the water Meribah. So Aaron is now put in with Moses, as it is to not be permitted to go into the promised land. And Aaron is connected to Moses at the waters of Meribah. That's the reasoning. He is labeled as being rebellious. The Numbers account doesn't necessarily talk in much detail about what Aaron did, what he didn't do, what he said or didn't say. All we know is he gets classified as having been rebellious in that same scene with Moses, and he suffers the consequence of not being able to enter into the land and actually dies here at the mount. So if Aaron dies, all this responsibility, if you recall, had been given to him in relationship to the priestly responsibilities. Now what, right? Now what do you do? So what'd they do? Okay, so they take Eleazar and they begin to bestow upon him all of the responsibilities that Aaron had been having as the leader over the priesthood. And what did they do to signify that? Okay, so they took those garments. That's the second question, by the way, in the list of questions. What was done under Aaron dies? What was done with Aaron's garments? They were taken from him and put on to Eleazar. Moses did as the Lord commanded, and they went up into Mount Or in the sight of all the congregation. Moses stripped Aaron of his garments and put them upon Eleazar his son, and Aaron died there in the top of the mount, and Moses and Eleazar came down from the mount. And when all the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, they mourned for Aaron how long? 30 days. Even all of the house of Israel. I don't know the answer to the question I'm about to ask you, by the way. I just want you to think about it. For a guy that people complained a whole lot about, that's a lot of mourning. Right? I mean, it didn't seem that they didn't ever seem to go very long without being upset with Moses and Aaron about something. But then when he's gone, the mourning sets in. I would imagine there was probably a lot of guilt among the people about the way they had treated and dealt with Aaron over this span of time. You're at the end of this punishment period, so the excitement level, right? First year of the wandering, where's the morale? Right, it's down here, right? The morale's down here because we were right on the doorstep of the promised land, and now none of us over the age of 20 that were fighting men that got counted in the beginning of the book, none of us are going to the promised land, and we got to wander in the wilderness for 40 years for all of us to die off. It's not a great start, right? Year 1 doesn't feel very good. Year 40 feels pretty good because you've kind of paid the penalty. You're coming out the other side of that, and you're working towards the promised land now. But all of a sudden, right before that, one of your main leaders is gone, and they'll eventually lose both before they actually go in to the promised land. I get it, is what I'm trying to say. I can understand how this mourning would take place, and not uncommon, right, for mourning to go over many days in those times. It happened at the death of Joseph. It happens on other occasions within Scripture where the mourning period of time is quite extensive as it relates to that. And that happens here with Aaron. Transition time, right? We're about to go into the promised land, new generation, new leadership, new fulfillment in God, new excitement about what God has in store for them. Lots of transition happening here in this 40th year in relationship to that. Any other questions you might have or thoughts you might have had about that scene? Just trying to make sure I didn't miss something.
One of the questions is how did God? You don't know how to God.
Yeah, he just did. Yeah, the how is God. Well, and I suppose the generically is God, in a sense, took his life there, right? God said this is going to happen. He's going to be gathered with his people, and it happened according to the command and purposes of God. But we don't know. You're right, and in many senses, that could have been looked just as natural as any of the other of that generation or the 20-year-old plus that had died in the wandering of the wilderness.
Was that Aaron's problem when they struck the rock?
That's what the text says. The text says this was punishment for his rebellion at Meribah. And so that seems to be the only singular reasoning at this moment given for God's decision to not let him go in.
Wasn't there just Eleazar, Moses, and Aaron up on the mountain when he was taken?
Yeah, it appears that. Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I don't speak out of turn because I didn't think about that aspect.
Verse 25. It just says he died.
Yeah, but he's right. You're right. So it appears, though, that when the announcement that he's going to die comes, Moses takes Aaron and just Eleazar up and brought them up onto the mountain. So it appears that way to me. Just a quick read. Yeah. Because they go up, he takes the robes, he gives them to Eleazar, Aaron dies, Moses and Eleazar come back down off the mountain. Now that appears to be the process. Then when the congregation saw, well, what did they see? They didn't see Aaron die. They saw that 3 men went up on the mountain and only 2 of them come back, and they're able to pretty quickly realize what's going on here, especially understanding the context of the situation. Mm-hmm.
Do you get the impression when Aaron went up to the mountain, and he's wearing all these robes?
I think the purposes of God are understood between Moses and Aaron, and maybe even Eleazar when they leave. I think they would understand what's about to happen. Yep. All right, so jump to the next chapter, chapter 21. And so, and again, chronology is hard, but when God told them they were going to have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years because of their complaints against Moses and their rebellion against God, when they said they can't go take the land, what'd they try to do? They tried to take it anyway, right? Now they realize, oh wow, that wasn't a good idea for us. We want to show God we're on His side. Let's go take it. And when they went up, what happened? Yeah, they got whipped. Is what happened because they've tried to flaunt against what God's commands were concerning that generation. So fast forwarding now you begin to start seeing what? Yeah, success, right? You're going to start seeing success with this group of Canaanites. You're going to start seeing success with Og. You're going to start seeing success with Sihon. You're going to start seeing a building of success. Fast forward in your historical mind for a moment. Why are those successes going to be important when the actual conquest of the land starts?
They're going to be afraid. They've heard everything that's been said.
That's right. If you remember, Rahab says that in Jericho, right? Rahab specifically says, we have heard about what you all did to Og and Sihon, and we're afraid of you. We've been fearful of you guys ever since you've been camping over there on the other side of the river. And so that history of success is part of divine purpose as it begins to build the mindset in the region of what the God of these people is actually going to do, which is actually interesting, right? Because Moses, when he had to argue for their lives, said, Lord, if you wipe them out as just one man, what will those nations think? God's not powerful enough to have any success, right? Remember that? Moses says they'll think you're not powerful enough to actually conquest the land, and so you just slaughtered them out here in the wilderness so that you wouldn't be embarrassed by that. That was Moses' argument. Well, now they're going to start building successes so that the people know, they actually, they're not just nomads out here. Now they're going to have some failures and mistakes, and there's going to be issues, but they're starting to build a reputation in the region as having the ability to take on various places. So they have this victory early on in verses 1 through 3 over the Canaanites, and they utterly destroyed them and their cities, and he called the name of the place Hormah. Now, again, I'll take you back to this map for a moment, and let me see if I can erase some of the gibberish I put on here earlier. And I'm going to see if I can get just... anyway. So, initially, here's where they believe Hormah is. Okay? Southern end of the promised land where the Canaanites were. That battle that's mentioned there in those first 3 verses seems to be something that happens prior to potentially coming southward before they hook around and go back to the north as they travel the coast of Edom. And you see the hesitancy in me because it's challenging to kind of get a clear picture of where they actually went and when they actually went there. Let me share a different text with you. I want you to go over pause. Sorry. I'm ahead of myself. Let's get the bronze serpent out of the way, and then we'll go there. So we've got this victory over those Canaanites that were on the southern end of the promised land. And they journey from where Aaron died, Mount Or, right, by the way of the Red Sea towards the sea to compass to stay out of where? Edom. And a lot of people were discouraged because, again, we're in the 40th year, excitement. We just beat some of those guys, right? If this chronology works, we just had some success, but the Edomites won't let us just go across their land. So now we're going to have to come down out of that region and follow this blue line on the screen right here down towards the south. Okay? So we're heading southward towards the sea before we can go northward. And what's the disposition of the people? They're discouraged by the way. And what happens when these people tend to get discouraged? They complained. So they speak against God in verse 5. And they say, did you bring us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? How many, do you think Moses got tired of hearing that? It's about every time something doesn't go their way, you've ruined it for all of us, Moses. That's what they turn to. That's their pet argument. There's no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth this light bread. Still being fed by God through manna, but they've already been tired of that for a long time. They don't have the resources or the access by which to do much else. The water's still not a great situation. But God, these are the people, for the most part, that are supposed to go take the land. And they're starting to head right down the same path that their predecessors did. So God does something very powerful to kind of set them back in order. What's He do? He sends these serpents among the people. And basically, if you got bit, you died. No anecdote, no, just. And so they come to Moses, and here's what I appreciate about them. That maybe their predecessors didn't grasp as quickly. What did they say to Moses when they come to him? Yeah, we did this. We did not. You did this. Why is God doing this? We did this. We caused this. We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that He take away the serpents from us. And so Moses did. Now, if you were living in a land that had a bunch of fiery snakes running around, what would your prayer be? Get rid of them, right? Get rid of them. Right? I'm not looking for an answer of right? I'm wanting resolve. I'm wanting resolve. But that's not what He gives them. What's He give them? A remedy. He gives them a remedy. A way to live even if they're bitten by the fiery serpents that came because they sinned. So Moses made a serpent of brass and put it on a pole, and it came to pass that if a certain serpent had bitten any man when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. What was the obligation of the one bitten? He had to look. You had to have enough faith and belief that if I look to that brazen serpent that Moses put on that pole, I'll be able to restore my life that otherwise would be gone. And I've got to commit to that idea that's going to work. Where does this idea of one being put up on a pole, where does that come back in conversation in much later history? Right? When Jesus is speaking, John 3, and he tells that audience of people, as Moses lifted up the serpent, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. When Jesus spoke of his crucifixion, that brings salvation and life to the death that sin causes. Extremely parallel, right? Extremely parallel. What's happening here in the days of Moses with him putting up this remedy. It didn't just emanate out from the brazen serpent and just automatically heal. People had to believe and have enough faith to put their own eyes on it if they were bitten, to find the life that was being provided there. It's not any different with Jesus. Without faith and conviction to actually come to the salvation and life that Jesus offered, I'll continue to die in my sin. Just the same as they would have died by the bite of a fiery serpent if they refused to look towards that brazen serpent. Now, the sad part about this thing is what did they do once the fiery serpents went away and they moved past this piece of history? Well, yeah, they kept it. They kept this brazen serpent, and later in history gave it a name, called it Nehushtan, and were treating it like an idol. And Hezekiah comes into the picture and has to finally remove it so that the people aren't bowing down to this brazen serpent that had been made for life-giving purposes later in history. It's just an interesting piece of this puzzle that what was once valued as something precious, they had turned into a trinket later in their history. But we're in this piece of the history right now. So the children set forward, the text says. They've most likely been traveling south, but now it's time to head towards the promised land. And where you find them in this picture is in a couple of locations. They talk about a place called Ehim Eber. I'll never say it right. I tried. Way to the north. Oboth is mentioned. These are lands that appear to be part of what? What region? Well, let me circle it for you. It's right here to the north, the last one. And this is Edom. And they're down here at the bottom. It looks like they got to travel through what to get there? Edom. I thought we weren't going through Edom. Right? I think the understanding should probably more like when they were up here to the north, right? They weren't going to make a straight line across Edom, up through Moab, and up on the other side of Jordan to be able to just cross over. They had to compass Edom for a while before they were allowed to turn to the north. But it is interesting, and I think it's important, and bear with me if history puts you to sleep, I won't fault you if I have to wake you in a minute. But let me, I want you to go over to Deuteronomy chapter 2. I'll show it to you on the screen. Same piece of history. Deuteronomy chapter 2, same piece of history that we're dealing with here in Numbers. So notice, then we turned and took our journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea, as the Lord spake unto me, and we compassed Mount Seir many days. What's significant about Mount Seir? Anybody remember? Who was that promised to? Who are the Edomites? Where did they come from? Esau. That was promised to Esau. God promised that to Esau. Okay, that's Edom. Esau's descendants. Right? So we're going to compass. So when you see Mount Seir, just think Edom. Right? They're not just going to be allowed to just traipse across there. He said, you're going to come and compass it. They've been doing this for a while by this point in Deuteronomy chapter 2. So the Lord said, you've compassed this mountain long enough. Turn you northward. Okay, you've been skirting on the border of Edom, wandering around long enough. It's time we could turn northward. And command thou the people, saying, you are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau, which dwell in Seir, and they shall be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore. Did it sound like they were afraid of him in Numbers chapter 20? No. And so I think what you have here are, in some senses, two separate groupings of people within Edom, right? You've got those who were to the north in the region. When they were asked, can we just come straight across here and then we'll go to the north and we'll try to stay on the highway. We're not going to, if our cattle drinks any water, we'll pay you for it, right? They try to make that, and that part of Edom says what? No, not going to do it. So we compass, we work our way around Edom for a while until it's finally time to turn northward. But by this time, which side of Edom are we going to go through? Yeah, from the south and central east rather than on the western border. So two different locations of where you're going to enter Edom from. It appears the first attempt was to go straight across it on the northern side when they were coming out of Kadesh Barnea initially. Nope, you're going to circumvent it. Now, God says, you've done this enough. We've compassed about Mount Seir long enough. Let's turn north. And so now you can see how the people would start to the north. That's how they end up in these cities that Numbers chapter 21 mentions, as they begin now to traverse through Edom in a different location. But I want you to notice something. Command thou the people, saying, you are to pass through the coast of your brethren of the children of Israel, the children of Esau, which dwell in Seir, and they shall be afraid of you. Take you good heed unto yourselves, therefore. Meddle not with them, for I will not give you of their land, no, not so much as a footbreadth, because I have given Mount Seir unto Esau for a possession. He basically tells them, listen, you're not stopping, you're not taking anything, none of Edom belongs to you. Just get through it and move forward. Because I've given that possession to Esau's descendants. You're not getting any of it. They are whose descendants? Jacob, Israel's, right? Esau's brother. You shall buy meat of them for money. Okay, if you need something from them, you're going to pay for it. That you may eat, and ye shall also buy water of them for money. You're going to pay for it, that ye may drink. For the Lord thy God hath blessed thee in all thy works of thy hand. He knoweth thy walking through this great wilderness these 40 years. The Lord thy God hath been with thee, thou hast lacked nothing. And when we passed by from our brethren the children of Esau, which dwelt in Seir, through the way of the plain from Eloth and Ezion-Geber, we turned and passed by the way of the wilderness of Moab. Right? Moab, all the way to the north. Okay? Above Edom. So we've circumvented them long enough. We're going to turn to the north now. You're not going to take anything from the Edomites. We're going to straight up towards Moab is where we're heading. The text says in Deuteronomy chapter 2. But when you get to the Moabites, don't bug them either, right? Don't distress them either. Neither contend with them in battle, for I will not give thee of their land for a possession, because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for a possession. And isn't that interesting? So Edomites, Esau's descendants, that's a possession for them. God's promised it's theirs. Moab came from Lot. He's been given a possession. You're not having that either. These are just places to get you where you're going. Deuteronomy, in some ways, might be dealing with the idea of here's what you're going to do when you get there, as much as it is trying to give us a chronological time frame of when certain things happened. Deuteronomy, if you read it, seems to be a lot more focused on this is how you're going to do things, less about in what order those things occurred. And so at either rate, and again, I'm no historian, but I'm just trying to lay these accounts side by side for you so that you can see that what Numbers is telling us about what the people are doing, Deuteronomy parallels that for us and shares with us a little more detail of why they were behaving that way. Why when that first, what appears to be a first grouping of Edomites refuse, why didn't they just draw swords, right? Well, it's because God's instructions were that's not how you're going to go through there. You're not taking any of that land for yourselves. That's not how this is going to work. God's instructions were pretty clear as to how they were to behave towards Edom and Moab through this process of ultimately getting far enough to the north where they can encamp on the other side of Jordan before they take Jericho in the process. Thoughts or questions about any of that? And I just thought Deuteronomy 2 was important for us to take a peek at.
Brian, we talked about the descendants of Lot. Well, there was another descendant of Lot. The two children he fathered with his daughters. And those were the people that settled in what we call Ammon.
Yeah. The Ammonites, when you deal with those folks.
Yeah, you deal with them later.
And I think it's important to really remind us of that, because I think sometimes we do forget that these nations that become troublesome to Israel, many of them came to be because of misbehaviors of people connected to God's purposes, whether it be Lot, the nephew of Abraham, or whether it be Esau or whomever, as it relates to these situations. So they're making their trips. They're heading, verse 13 says, they've removed then, pitched on the other side of Arnon, which is in the wilderness that cometh out of the coast of the Amorites. For Arnon is the border of Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. Wherefore it is said in the book of the wars of the Lord. Where's that at? Open up your Bibles to the book of the wars. Well, we have some of the history, right? But if you go back up, you'll find that Moses had been instructed to write all this down. And much of what we have in the first 5 books of the Bible come from the work of Moses, writing and accounting for the history that God told him to write down. But one of the specific things that he told him to chronicle, was the wars and battles that you're going to encounter. And records were kept that didn't necessarily make or were preserved for the purposes of being part of ultimately the full canon of Scripture. I think in fairness to history, we have to acknowledge that there were other things written about the history of God's people that aren't in the Bible. That even things that the Bible references, aren't they written in the chronicles of And there's no book after that guy, but there's a reference to that there's recordings made. Moses was told to write about the wars. He wrote about things concerning those things, but we don't necessarily have the fullness of a book written by Moses specifically to that purpose in his writings. And so you can kind of see that process unfold a little bit as the history unfolds. And then even when you see some of the books that Moses writes portions of, but somebody else has to finish because he dies. And somebody else has to write the conclusion of those books. And as we move through this history, we'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward.